We are live.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to be speaking with Judit Price, and let's just get right into it. Also, I want to let you know that you can chat in questions at any time on YouTube. So let's get right into the questions. Judit, please tell us your date of birth.
It's 1944. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
It's March 1st, 1944.
And where were you born?
I was born in Budapest, Hungary.
Tell us about your family, your father, your mother, your siblings.
Okay, I'm an only child, so I have no siblings. My father was had a business in Budapest until the Nazis came in, and you know, he was he had to flee, and actually he was caught and he was put into a slave labor camp, and then they wanted to ship him to Auschwitz, and he was on the train on his way, and then he jumped off the train and hid in a Hungarian farmer's property for about a month, till another farmer, neighboring farmer, figured it out what was going on and reported to the authorities. And then they captured him, and but it was too late for it. It was already, the Russians were already on the border, the Soviet Union was on the border, so it was kind of late to go send him back to Auschwitz. So they sent him to a Hungarian slave labor camp, where they were building train tracks and tunnels where the Germans could flee from the Russians. So that's where he was when I was born. So he hasn't seen me till I was about, I don't know, 2 months old or something. My mother was born in, actually, my mother was born in Budapest, but her parents were Austro-Hungarians. Her father died in the First World War as a captain of the Hungarian-Austrian Habsburg army. And my mother's mother, who was a second runner-up in the Hungarian beauty contest, and she was a widow, very young, and she married this very wealthy Hungarian capitalist man who owned several liquor factories, and he was producing and manufacturing and managing this factory where they were producing liquors, whiskey, vodka, whatever, you name it. My mother grew up in Vienna, where my grandparents had a home, and it was a very upper class family, and my grandmother had lived in a very plush surroundings, and they were very wealthy, and owned apartment buildings in Vienna and Budapest. So my mother grew up with governesses and nannies and all that. So when she met my father, she was actually working as an office manager in a Hungarian company. So they got married in 42, and I was born in 44. My father comes from a small town near the Czechoslovakian, today the Czech Republic border, called Nyíregyház. His parents were shopkeepers. They manufactured coats and suits, men's suits and coats. So they had a shop, a store where they were, selling the men's furnishings till their deaths. And then then my father moved to Budapest from Nyíregyház. He worked for them, with them, and he moved to Budapest and he opened up his business with his brother. So that was in 1944 till the Germans took it away from him. He wasn't allowed Jews weren't allowed to have a business. So that's the time during the war when I was a baby. My mother was when I was born in a hospital, but my mother it was in March. So my mother actually hid in a basement of our apartment building, which my grandparents owned the building, and my parents had an apartment there. And my mother was in the basement, the cellar, with me for several months till, and I would have died if she couldn't have nursed me. So she always said that I survived because she had enough milk to feed me. So she was in the cellar with me till Vollenberg came in, who was a Swedish diplomat, and his purpose was to save Jews in Budapest. So by the time he got there was 44. There was 100,000 Jews in Hungary. He saved 45 to 50,000 Jews, and 50,000 perished in the Holocaust, mostly from the countryside. The Jews in Budapest survived longer, and they had a better situation than the Jews in the small villages and the smaller cities. So he basically saved 45,000 Budapest Jews, and I'm one of them. Through my mother, who was in a Swedish Red Cross protected home, which Raoul Wallenberg, who was a Swedish diplomat, and he bought up these apartment buildings in Budapest, and he placed women with children, pregnant women, and young women with young children and babies to live there, and he was able to. And then he gave people a certificate which called Schutzpass, and that just claimed that they had some Swedish protection, and they weren't supposed to be touched by the Gestapo, the Nazis. And it worked for a while till it didn't work, till Eichmann came in, and then he tried to put an end to it. But that was kind of late, so in a war, and the Soviets were on the border, so he really couldn't do. He did some damage in the Budapest Jewry, but basically not as much as he could have if he had been in Budapest earlier. This answers your question?
Sure. What was it like in the Vollenberg house?
I don't know. I don't have any recollection. I was an infant.
Okay.
I only have secondhand information or third-hand. My parents never talked about the Holocaust. Of course, it was very painful for them. And I never really asked many questions for, I don't know why, but for some reason, I know it was painful, and I didn't want to stir up bad memories. My grandmother was shot my mother's mother was shot into the Danube. I think it was in November. In November of 44, because I think I was a few months old. She did meet me and she knew me, but she was rounded up, and several Jews were rounded up, and they brought to the embankment um, of the river, the Danube River. So what happened is they rounded up the people, and one by one they shot them in a freezing cold winter day into the waters, and naturally, of course, they died. But I don't know if any of you ever been to Budapest or plan to visit. There is one of the steps. There are several pairs of shoes, and one of the shoes was my grandmother's. Because that's how that's how they did it. They killed them. So anyways,
Did your parents ever have to wear the Star of David?
Yeah, they did. They did wear it in toward the end again in 44 when things got escalated and got worse. Yeah, they did wear the Star of David.
Let's talk about your father again. He was put on a train to Auschwitz, and then tell us that story again.
I mean, he was put on a train to Auschwitz. I think I was maybe 2 or 3 months old, and he saw an opportunity to jump off the train, and he did. And he was hiding in the forest for a while till he came upon this farmer's cottage, and his farmer took him in, and he let him live in the, I don't know if he lived in the barn or lived in his house, I'm not quite sure. But he stayed with him for a while till somebody in the neighborhood, another farmer, found out what was going on, and he denounced him. So, and then my father was put into a slave labor camp, which was for the purpose of digging tunnels and roads to build for the Nazis to escape, because they knew the Russians were going to be coming, or the Americans. The Allies would come and they have to escape at some point. So, so that's where my father worked, and they put him there to work.
Okay. So he was at the slave labor camp until the Russian liberation came,
right,
in
the
1945.
liberation, which was for 1945, correct, April.
So how many relatives were killed during the Holocaust?
Oh, my mother had a huge family in one of the smaller towns from her father's side, not from her mother's side. Her mother was an only child too, so her mother's side wasn't many relatives. But my mother's father's side was a huge family in a town called Szeged in Hungary. And I don't know, there's about, my mother's father had like 9 brothers and sisters. So there's cousins and aunts and uncles. A lot, every one of them were killed. Every one of them were deported to Auschwitz, but nobody survived.
Wow. Okay. How did your parents feel about the Soviets?
Oh, they hated them. They were horrible. They were maybe a grade better than the Germans, but not much. They raped women. They stole. They broke into homes and they took whatever they could. My mother, I remember, she was a young woman, so she said she put flour in her hair and put like a kerchief, like a babushka, to be left alone by the Russians because she's afraid she's going to be raped or murdered by them. The Russians were terrible. They treated women terribly, and they weren't the heroes that they made them out to be, or they made themselves out to be.
What was it like to go from
I
life?
can't hear, I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. What was it like to go from life under the Nazis to life under communism, under
Okay,
Stalin?
right. Well, my father was very fortunate because he and his brother teamed up and they opened up a business in downtown Budapest, one of the biggest thoroughfares and the most commercially frequented by people in the city and also visitors. And they had a storefront and they had a store where um, they were capitalists. They were not. So it was forbidden to be a shopkeeper, to have a store. So what my father did is they had a back room where was a sewing machine and an iron and a couple of coats hanging. One was half done. So if the communist would come in, he could show, you see, this is my workroom, and I making the coats by myself because they weren't allowed to hire people. And in real time, well, he had like 20, 25 people working for him in their homes. So I remember as a little girl going with him in a cab in the morning and collecting the coats, what these tailors made, and then bring it to the store and hang it up and you know, so my father could say that, you see, I made this coat. So he never had more than maybe 20 coats in the store and was by appointment only. So when people came to pick up the coats, it was there, but he never had a lot of inventory because he had to say that he was the tailor and he was not. He was the capitalist, the entrepreneur,
Okay.
and his brother the same way. Till they took it away, till they nationalized the business when I was about 16, I think, 16, 17. They finally realized it and what's going on, and they took it away from him. And actually, they threw my uncle to jail. They didn't throw my father because it was under my uncle's name. And he was just kept him for a week and then they let him go. But still, he was in jail because he had a business.
Okay. Tell me about the food scarcity or bread lines.
Okay, the food scare, you mean during the Holocaust, or afterwards?
Both.
Okay,
How was it
so,
like before and after? How about
well,
that?
like I said before, the Jews in Budapest had a much easier time because the regent Horthy, Miklos Horthy, was kind of protecting them. He had some kind of a contract or something with the Germans that were in return for something he did. So he was able to protect the Jewish population in Budapest. So there was plenty of food. That was not a problem till, of course, toward the end when my mother had to hide in the cellar and the Swedish, that time food was scarce and people were starving. And after the war, there were ration cards, and there wasn't much food, but they managed. I happened to grow up with a silver spoon, if you will, in my mouth, because my father had a business and he made good money, and my mother was able to buy good food and nourishing food, and my mother had a live-in help, and so I did grow up fortunately very well till I was 16, and then things have changed drastically. But till I was that age, it was my schoolmates all envied me, and they was, I was very fortunate actually.
Yeah, so your
So there was
story.
the food was scarce again during the revolution in '56, there were bread lines, and I remember my parents were standing in a bread line. And I was young, I was only like 12 years old, so naturally I didn't stand in the bread line, but I would stand with them, and the Russians were shooting around us. I remember that. But after the revolution was over, my father went back to his business, continued, and things were good for another 5, 6 years.
Okay. When did you leave communist Hungary?
I left in 65, and I went to Germany with my mother. My parents got reparation money from the Germans. So my father went ahead of us. My parents had a very lovely apartment on Budapest, on the banks of the Danube. This was my grandparents' building, and it was a very big apartment with high ceilings, and was really a beautiful place. And my parents left everything there. And I think we had a feeling that one of the Communist Party members wanted that apartment. So they allowed my father to get a passport and leave, because families couldn't live together. They couldn't live Hungary together. So my father left. And then a couple months later, my mother and I left. Of course, there was no internet or, computers to check when people come and go. So my father never came back, and they didn't know that. So we had a passport because they thought that my father would be back by then. And my mother and I left, and we all went to Düsseldorf, Germany. We were emigrated. My parents left everything, their Oriental rocks, their sterling silvers, their beautiful furniture, everything. China, everything. And left. And the reason they actually left, because my father, after my father's business was taken away, he couldn't get a job. He was already 60, I think, and he couldn't get a job. So he worked on the black market, and he smuggled money out, his friends and his own, to Switzerland. And he did that for a couple of years. And again, he was afraid that he was going to get caught. So he ended up leaving, saying that he's going on vacation. And that time they allowed people to go on abroad, as long as not the whole family, just him by himself. So he got this passport. He went to Düsseldorf. He had some money because he smuggled it out through the black market. So he wasn't penniless. And that's how we lived till my parents got the reparation from the Germans.
How old were you when you left?
21.
21?
I was 21.
Okay.
I wasn't permitted to go to university because I was Jewish. So I went to evening school, university at the evening adult education. This what would be called here adult education. There it's called, I don't know what, the evening school. Because I wasn't the only one whose parents were not communists. So I went to school at night, college, and I worked during the day at the Indonesian embassy. I spoke, I think, about 4 or 5 languages. And so I was an interpreter, a translator. I had a very good job, and I was paid very well. I made more money than my parents did. And they did that. And at age 20, when I was 21, my father decided that he has to leave because they cut off him smuggling money to Switzerland. So like I said, he left, and my mother and I left. And 5 days after I was out of Hungary, in Düsseldorf, I met my husband. And 4 weeks we were engaged, and 6 months we were married.
That's amazing.
So when
you arrived in Germany, tell me about that, what you remember
Well, I was
when your
21,
family
so
arrived then.
I remember I was 21 years old. Of course, I remember. Um, I lived first. Our parents lived separately because it was very difficult to get an apartment, to rent an apartment those days in Germany, to Düsseldorf. So then after a while, we found an apartment. So the three of us lived again together. But shortly after that, I got married. I moved with my husband to Stuttgart, where he was in the army intelligence, and so he wasn't wearing a uniform when I met him. He was wearing civilian clothes. Only after we married, they took it away from his job and gave him a military job. So he had to wear a uniform. So, but that wasn't long because he was getting out of the army. It was still at the end of his time, and he got out of the. We got married in December, and he was done with the army by June or July, something like that. So it was only for 6 months. And that's the reason I didn't send him to Vietnam, because was already he didn't have enough time. He volunteered, he enlisted, he wasn't drafted. So the reason he would have been shipped to Vietnam, but he was getting off. He only had like 6 months left from his tenure, so they let him leave, and he wasn't sent overseas.
Tell us about your children and your grandchildren, your family.
Okay, I have 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. My oldest son is 52, 53, 53, 53. He's a chemical engineer who started his own pharmaceutical company, which he sold a couple of years ago. And he became extremely wealthy. And he lives in Massachusetts on the water, and also in outside of Savannah. And I have a middle son. He has one daughter, my granddaughter, who's 24 years old. And I have a middle son who is 50, and he used to live in New York till he moved to, because of family obligations from his wife's side. He moved to Michigan. His wife is from Michigan, so they live there. He's in the energy space, and he has 2 little girls, 3 and 6 years old. Actually, I'm very excited with they coming this afternoon at 6 o'clock, landing in Fort Myers. So it's a very big day for me. I haven't seen them since last December. Adorable, lovely 2 little girls, my love of my life. And I have a daughter who is 42. She's my baby. She's the youngest, and she's a Broadway producer, extremely famous in New York. She's very well known. She won 3 Tony Awards. She's up for the 4th one. She just got a Grammy a couple of days ago on the Grammy Award. She won a Grammy. She is delight. She's a wonderful, wonderful woman. She's coming from Mother's Day. Adore her. She's a great, great daughter. She doesn't have any children. She's divorced. She works constantly. It's a pretty Broadway. Of course, right now it's no Broadway shows, but they preparing and they doing other things. They doing a lot of stuff on Netflix and movies and streaming and a lot of different things to supplement Broadway till it comes back.
It's amazing.
And I have a 24-year-old granddaughter who lives in New York, and she just getting her master's this spring in business and fashion merchandising, getting a graduate degree.
Well, that's wonderful. So would you remind me again, what year did you come to America?
66.
66. What did you do when you came to America?
Okay. I was pregnant very quickly on my first anniversary. I got pregnant, must have been on my honeymoon. It was on my first anniversary. I was already pregnant. So I had my oldest son very early. So my husband was working for Gillette company, and then later on he worked for Digital Corporation. He had a big job in high tech. And so I was home for several years, and I had another son. So I was home being a mom. And then when my middle son was in kindergarten, I decided to go back to school and get my degree. And I ended up getting another bachelor degree because I did get one in Budapest also. I never had the diploma because we left before I was able to collect it. So I went back and I got a bachelor degree here in the United States. And my degree was in social work, psychology and social work. And I worked in a women's alcohol center where I was working with drug and alcohol abusing women. And then I did that for a while, and then I realized it was too stressful, and I wanted to. And then I went back and got a master's degree in counseling, and then I started to work in a college, and I was teaching and being a counselor in a counseling office, and then I realized I want to have my own business, and I went back and got another master's degree and started my own company. And I had a company for 35 years, a career management company, like similar to HR. I worked with people I was an executive coach. I worked with executives who were laid off during the downsizing was always downsizing in Boston, so Massachusetts. So that was, I went through a lot of periods when I had contracts with big companies when I was doing the outplacement support for them, and I tried to place executives in different positions. So I wasn't a recruiter. I didn't do recruiting. I strictly did the managing of the careers of these people. And I also worked with college students who didn't know what college to go to and what to study. So I worked with them on career management and career assessment. And I did it for 35 years. I loved it. It was a wonderful career. And I miss it sometimes, and sometimes I'm happy I'm not doing it anymore. But it was great.
Good. Do you think your experience in Budapest under the Nazis and Wallenberg guided your choice of profession?
Well, I think I can mention before, I was a baby during the Nazis and Wallenberg. So I have no recollection of anything from Wallenberg and the Nazis. I have recollection of the communists. And well, my major was always languages. So I wanted to work for the UN as an interpreter. That's what I was planning on doing. And then it didn't work out because I got pregnant very early, and I couldn't work. I mean, those days women didn't work unless they had to. So and I had nobody to watch my children. I had no family here. So I gave up the dream to work for the UN. And of course, my language skills is kind of became very rusty because I don't speak them anymore. But I think my profession came from the fact that I love to go to school, I love to learn, I love to study. So I enjoyed taking classes for, I don't know, I was in school for like 20 years. And I like psychology and sociology. Those are my history. Those were my favorite subjects. So I guess I just by default I fall into that, and I like people. Always like to help and educate and train people. So I guess it just kind of happened. Serendipity.
What message do you want the the participants or the students to know about your experiences?
Okay, well, first of all, never give up, no matter what. If you put your mind to something, just pursue it. It will, if hard work and initiative and being tenacious and persistent, it will help and will get you toward your goal. Don't hate anybody. Hate is a terrible, terrible thing, as we all know how horrible all these murders happening in this country. Try to look at the good side of everyone, because everybody has the good side, and try to forgive. You know, if somebody hurt you, I understand to feel terrible, but try not to hate anyone because of their skin color or their eye color or their language or their religion or their values or culture. We all the same. We all humans. Don't ever stop learning. Always try to. I'm still learning. I am taking lots of OSHA classes and different classes on Zoom and WCA where I belong in Naples. We have all kind of lectures. I always learn and I am in 5 different book clubs and movie groups and playwright groups. I love the art, you know, try to build art into your life because art is very important to have. Be happy, enjoy every minute because we don't know how long it's gonna last. Unfortunately, life is very short. I guess that's about it. I don't know what else to say.
Have you returned to Budapest?
Yeah, I've been there 3 times since I defected. I took my children back. The first time, all 3 of them. My daughter was very little, and my father was there, so we were able to spend some time with my father. My mother died when I was 9 months pregnant with my daughter, so I lost my mother very young. My father lived much longer, but then he moved back from Germany, moved back to Budapest. So I saw him there, and then I went back with my middle son one summer just to visit my father. And then the 3rd time, I took my oldest granddaughter, who is now 24. We went to Budapest and showed her where I lived and where I went to school, and just give her a little idea of my earlier life.
So did your family lose their all of the property in Budapest? Or
My family, what? I didn't hear. What?
Did your family lose the property in Budapest?
Everything.
Did they lose everything? Yes.
Yeah, they lost everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about Germany? Have you been back to Germany at all?
I really try not to go there. I don't know how my parents could live there. I went back once to Berlin with my granddaughter. When we went to Budapest, I never been to Berlin, and my husband and I said we should go to Berlin. So we went to Berlin for a few days, but that's about it. I don't have any desire to go.
You only briefly lived there anyway.
I lived there
Is that correct?
because my parents lived there, and that's where I met my husband, and he had to finish his army obligation, so we couldn't leave till he was dismissed from the army in June, I think, June or July, and we
So
got
you were only there for about a year then, right?
Yeah, I was exactly a year. Yeah, July to July. Yeah.
You know, I have a question for you, Judith. You know,
Sure.
moving from Budapest to Germany, do you think that that would have been a very scary experience for your parents, considering the Holocaust and what you all experienced in Budapest?
But my father had no choice. He had to go. And Germany was welcoming Jews. So he was able to go there and get a visa, and he got reparation. He couldn't stay in Budapest anymore because of his occupation. He was
Mhm.
smuggling in the black market money.
Yeah.
So he just was a matter of days or weeks for him to get the communists catch up with him. So he
Yeah.
had to leave. He had a brother in Italy whom we were going to go to, but he died a year before. So we couldn't go to Italy anymore because his brother was dead. So Germany offered asylum and reparations to the Jews. So that's the only choice he had. I'm sure they didn't love the Germans. They didn't feel like living there. They never had any German friends. They socialized with all the expatriates, like them, the expats. With all the other Hungarians and Romanians and German Jews and Czech and Polish and whatever, Austrian.
Mhm.
So they didn't have anything to do with the Germans except go to the supermarket or something like that.
Mhm.
But he had no choice. Either that or the communists will catch him, and you could get many, many years of prison term for smuggling money in the black market.
Absolutely. And I'd like to shout out to our live listeners. If you have any questions of your own, we still have about 16 minutes remaining. So if you have any, please throw them into the YouTube live chat and we will ask them on your behalf to Miss Judith here.
So, is there anything else you can tell us about your parents' lives
I think
that
I
you have
pretty
known?
much covered everything. The only thing I want to just mention is, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
okay, because I didn't hear myself. That Ralph Vollenberg, he was a wonderful, wonderful man, a great hero. The Russians killed him, murdered him in Lubyanka, which is their Gestapo in Moscow, because they made up the story that he was a spy for the Americans, which was not true. He was he's educated in the United States. He went to University of Michigan, became an architect, and he lived in Stockholm all his life. He was very young when he came to in his early 30s. So he was very young, and he really came here for humanistic reasons, wanted to save innocent people from the Nazis. And just about when the Nazis were leaving, and he thought he was able to contribute to saving Jews, the Russians got him. So it is just a terrible crime from the Russians' part. I mean, there is streets named after Wallenberg, schools named after him, theaters, parks. He's an incredibly admired and adored hero in among the Budapest Jewish community.
So he's saved about 45 to 50,000
Yeah, among
people.
yeah, he did.
That
He did.
is,
And somebody said that he was very close with his grandfather, and his great great grandfather was Jewish. So I guess maybe he put that also added to his his desire of helping. But he was brought up as Catholic, and his parents were Catholic, and his grandfather was Catholic, but his great great grandfather, I understand, was Jewish. And um, there's a lot of rumors about him that he had girlfriends, he had boyfriends. We don't know, and it doesn't really matter. His family didn't really do a lot to save him because they could have get him out of Budapest after things got, the Russians came in and he wasn't taken immediately, but they didn't really came and try to save him. So I don't know whom to blame, but it was a big disaster that it's a real catastrophic situation what happened to him. He didn't deserve that.
Yeah, that's true. So, no questions yet.
What?
No,
sorry?
no questions yet.
No, okay. That's all right. That's okay. No problem.
I'm trying to think of something else that I can ask you. Hey, tell me about you working in the Indonesian embassy. What was that like?
Oh, it was great. I had so much fun. I was 19 years old, really young, and I had a really very responsible job. I don't know any 19-year-old in this country or anywhere else with that kind of a responsibility. I was very impressed with the fact that I got the job. I was very proud of it. And I could thank it to my language, abilities. And I spoke so many languages. And I just loved it. It was great. It was, I went to cocktail parties and different kind of events with the ambassador and the press attaché and translated for them and dinners, great dinners and parties and all I had to do was translate what they said. So it was great.
Could you tell us more about your father? Do you believe that him jumping off the train to Auschwitz saved his life?
Well, of course, the train was
for sure.
The train was designated to go to Auschwitz. They were taking, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of people, maybe 100, I don't know. They were on their way and he jumped off the train. Of course, it saved his life.
What year was that again? I'm sorry.
That's 44.
44, okay. Is there anything else that you could think of that you haven't talked about?
Well, I think I covered pretty much. Like I said, my parents didn't talk much about the Holocaust. Everything I knew, I learned it from them. And it was not a topic of conversation at the dinner table or any other times in our lives. It was not this. We didn't discuss the Holocaust. We didn't talk about it. It was a very sad, memories from my parents, so they didn't dwell on it. And so I went to a Jewish high school, and even then, there wasn't that much about the Holocaust. Even there, I went to a Jewish high school because when I was maybe 10 or 11 years old, I came home from elementary school, and I think a boy was calling me a dirty Jew. And I got so upset and I was crying for days that my father said, you're not going to a public school, you're going to go to a private school. And it's a private Jewish school. And that's where I went.
So even in the Jewish school, they didn't talk much about the Holocaust?
No.
Okay.
We do have a question in the YouTube chat. They ask, will you tell your grandchildren about your stories and struggles you went through?
Sure. My grandparents have seen my previous tape, what you guys did in November, with many of my friends and relatives and my children. And also my daughter, who is the Broadway producer, she interviewed me also. So we have it, of course. Of course. And the two little ones, they're too young. They're only 3 and 6, but they will have the tapes.
We have another question that came in. Would you ever trade your experience?
For what? Trade my experience for what should I trade?
I would imagine that they mean, would you wish that your life went any other way, from what you
No,
experienced?
no, I'm very happy. The experiences I had, it made me a much more fuller person, much more empathetic, much more somebody appreciates things. I don't take things for granted. I do have a very good life here in Naples, and I give great. I feel I'm blessed, and I am grateful every single day for what I have. And I know I have friends who grew up in America with they had a normal everyday life but I didn't have any of it what I had, and they much less grateful and happy. And no, I don't think I would trade my experiences for anything.
They
And I
did
had
clarify,
wonderful.
they said, do you wish that you just never went through it? That you didn't
No,
have those
no,
struggles?
no, I don't. I don't say I wish I wish I didn't lose my mother at age 64 and lose my grandmother at such an early age. Yes, but otherwise, I'm content. I just wish I didn't lose so many family members. Yes, that's definitely it. I wish I had grown up with siblings. Wish I had grown up with family around me. It was only the three of us always. So that's the only thing I wished. And I didn't have more siblings. I didn't have more family. And I didn't have a fourth child. I only have three. I wish I had a fourth one.
Now everyone's pretty chatty, which is wonderful. We have another person who wrote, we heard from another survivor who said her experience shook her religious beliefs. Being so young when you went through this, has it changed your view or beliefs?
I never been terribly religious. I mean, I'm very proud to be Jewish, and I am more a cultural Jew, a social Jew, than I am a religious Jew. I do observe the high holidays, and like there's going to be Passover this weekend. And I did bring up my children, go to Hebrew school and into services. My husband comes from a more religious family than I am. So all my children are, they pretty much observing holidays. Two of them married Jewish, and one didn't. My father pretty much lost religion after what happened in the Holocaust. I know he told me that he just can't believe anymore. My mother was a little bit more religious. He did light the candles on Friday night sometimes, not all the time, but most of the time. I'm not really religious, but I am Jewish and very traditional Jewish.
There's another question. Do you keep in touch with anyone that you grew up with that may have had similar struggles as you?
No,
No.
I lost everybody touch with them. No, I don't. I'm not. I'm sorry. At that time, maybe I'm sorry about that, but no, because when I left, it was after high school graduation. At college, I didn't make any friends. I had wonderful friends in high school and kind of lost in touch with them. Yeah, I didn't pursue it, but maybe I should have. No.
Do you have a final message for us?
I already said in a message before, just study hard, be nice to everybody. Don't try not to hate people because they're different.
Well,
Be
thank
kind.
you
Well,
so
yes.
much. It's been wonderful having you speak with us again. Your first
Sure.
presentation was wonderful in November, and of course, that's still available on the FSW YouTube channel. And I just really hope to have you again in the future for our events, for, you know, you to continue sharing your story, as it's very important. And we will have another event at 6 o'clock today when your family comes in. So I really hope that you have a wonderful time with your
Thank
visiting
you.
family, and for the upcoming Passover celebration. I think that's going to be wonderful.
I'm very excited. And thank you. I mean, I appreciate these talks because, you know, there are people out there who claim that the Holocaust never existed. There is no such thing. Just like they claim there is no COVID, you know, and people died from a flu and not COVID. So there are people who deniers. And those people are wrong, totally wrong. And I want people to know not to believe those people, because there was a Holocaust. There was 6 million innocent people, men, women, and children died just because they were Jewish. And so, you know, that's important to keep it alive, and don't let anyone we shouldn't allow anyone to question it or claim it's not true.
Absolutely. And that's certainly our mission as the Dr. Talbot Spivak Holocaust Memorial Planning Committee, that it never happens again, you know, that we continue to keep these stories moving forward.
Right.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And
I
we're
enjoy
going
it.
to
I appreciate it.
disconnect from YouTube Live and hope to have more people join us for our 6 o'clock session tonight. So let me end the stream.